Hello, hello. I hope you are healthy and happy. Today I am going to chat about something that I was inspired to talk about because of what's going on with my dear mother. So, as everybody does, my mom's been experiencing some challenges in her marriage, as we all do. Marriage is so hard. It is so hard. And like a badass, grown-ass woman, she went in for some couples counseling with her partner. I try not to talk about therapy with my friends and family, so I dodge the topic like I'm playing dodgeball in high school because it is so uncomfortable for me and it often feels more like work and I get frustrated because I think I would do it a different way. Anyways, whatever. I'm sure this is true for a lot of other therapists. I had a friend once that said, when I go out to a bar, I never say I'm a therapist. When people ask what I do, I say I'm a waitress at Outback Steakhouse because they're not going to ask questions about that. But if you say I'm a therapist, people trauma dump on you. Anyways, I digress. I try not to talk about it. So 6 months ago, they went to couples counseling. Then recently, 6 months later, after couples counseling, my mom started venting to me and I slipped with my dang boundaries and I asked her what they've been working on in couples therapy. I'm like, well, what have you guys been doing? She said, they just talk. And I was like, yeah, okay. But what does the therapist say? What are the rules? What interventions have you been practicing? What's your homework been? And she's like, none of that. He says that he makes sure that we don't interrupt each other. Great. And that we validate each other's feelings. Wonderful. I'm like, how do you do that? She said, oh, well, he just pauses and says it makes sense that he's struggling with this because of his childhood. That's great. That's very validating. But that's all he has done. And she said they often go in and have the same argument over and over and over. And I'm like, okay, have you learned about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse from the Gottman method? Or have you learned how to do dialogue like in imago therapy? She's like, no, I don't know what any of that is. Oh my God. So they've been paying $160 a session every single frickin' week to go in and have the same fight over and over to gain absolutely no tools, no homework, no change. And eventually they're like, this isn't working, so let's just split up. Oh, that is just boiling my blood, y'all. It gives my profession a really bad rap. This is not the first time I've heard a similar experience that the therapist is nice and kind and validating, but that's it. So I recorded this episode to help you identify 5 signs it's time to fire your therapist or assertively request some significant changes. Either way, I had fun with this one and I hope you enjoy it. Hey there, and welcome to Not Your Therapist, the no BS podcast where I ditch the therapy couch and get real about life, love, work, and all the messy in-betweens. I'm Kayla Riley, a licensed therapist and founder of a group practice that now runs without me, giving me freedom to spend more time with my littles and to share the secrets of wellness I've learned with people like you. This isn't therapy. It's your go-to for real talk, practical tips, and the occasional truth bomb to help you thrive. And the best part? No diagnosis, no insurance company constraints. I get to take off the white gloves and tell it like it is because I'm not your therapist. If you're ready to break free from unhealthy patterns, navigate the messiness of life with more ease, and uncover the magic in your everyday moments, you're in the right place. Welcome to your healing era, friends. Let's do this. Therapy is supposed to be a place where you feel safe, you feel supported, they are guiding you, they're in control, right? They're helping you along. Just like in other medical professions, you want the medical professional to be the one taking you on a journey to health. For example, when I was pregnant, I didn't know what I needed, so I was counting on the doctor to know when I needed the strep B test and the glucose test. And I wasn't sitting there Googling, at what appointment should I remind my doctor that I need? Okay, similar things with a therapist. A therapist should know what you need and when you need it and guiding you along in this journey. But not all therapeutic relationships are created equal. Just like some doctors suck, some therapists suck. And I hate to say this, but I think a lot of us suck because our education can be very, very different. And sometimes it's a personality mismatch. Sometimes a therapist has just kind of gotten stale and lazy, just being quite honest. So that's why it's so important to know what to look for and to know when to say bye-bye. So sign number 1, they don't remember who the frick you are. Have you ever walked into a session and your therapist doesn't seem to know like your sister's name, but I told you about her last time, or like what you're talking about? Like, what did we work on last time? If they're flipping through their notes, trying to jog their memory, yikes. Therapists are human, right? And they're juggling a lot. I get it. Sometimes I could be redundant with clients. However, they should overall know you, your struggles, your goals, where you've been, what's been happening recently. If they're constantly forgetting, it's a sign that they're really not present or invested in you and your healing journey. That's just not okay. Sign number 2, your sessions are all venting, no value. We've all had those sessions where we need to come in and just vent, and that's perfectly healthy and fine, especially in the beginning of treatment. The therapist should be giving you lots of space to share and open up and really let them into your world. Totally healthy and okay. But if every single session feels like one of those one-sided rants with no tools, no strategy, and the therapist doesn't seem to have like control of interrupting the venting and taking you kind of to the next step, that's a huge problem. Therapy should help you grow, and that requires structure. So ask yourself, does my therapist have a plan for me? Can they explain their approach or what modality they're using? So there are evidence-based modalities such as cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, the Gottman method, Imago, right? Imago is actually not evidence-based, but I digress. You deserve to know what they are using to help you, and it should be tailored to your needs. Like some people are just not going to jive with cognitive behavioral therapy because it's so incredibly structured. We get a lot of clients at our group practice here in Wilmington, North Carolina, from other practices or therapists in town, and they share to us like, hey, I made this switch because I feel like my therapist was nice, but I just didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. The therapist should be guiding you away from storytelling eventually into that skill building phase of treatment. If a therapist can't do that for you, you need to find someone else. And when I say interventions or skill building, I'm meaning things like, are they role playing with you, boundary setting conversations that you need to have with your partner, for example, or an intervention like a worksheet on the 3 C's of anxiety. Or maybe empty chair where you're pretending to process an argument or something from your childhood with somebody who's actually not in the room, but they're helping you get into that emotional state by talking to that person or that body part. That's called empty chair. Or maybe they're providing psychoeducation, like teaching you about the sympathetic nervous system or the cognitive behavioral chain and how to identify your thoughts and whether they're distorted or not. That's what I mean. If you're just saying no to all of those and you've been in therapy for 6 months, fire your therapist immediately. Okay, sign number 3, they judge you or they're showing a bias. So therapy is supposed to be a judgment-free zone. Sometimes therapists bring their own biases into the room. And when I say sometimes, I mean always. Therapists are human and they inherently have biases. A good therapist knows their own biases and is working through those to keep them in check so that they don't impact the treatment with you. But if you have a therapist who's maybe giving you advice, like this is what you should do, or they're taking sides, or they're minimizing your feelings, this is a humongous red flag. Your therapist should be helping you process and explore your feelings, not make you feel ashamed or unheard or prescribing what you should do. That's a common misjudgment, is like that the therapist should tell you. No. They should never tell you. Their job is to help you with skills acquisition and processing so that you can decide for yourself. So I'll give you an example. When my kids were born, after Miles was born, I had obviously gotten pregnant after 3 years of an infertility journey, a long one, a hard one. So I had gone through IVF and all of these other things, and I had a traumatic 72-hour labor that ended in a C-section. I said it. 72 freaking hours in labor. It was awful. My head was spinning. My hormones were out of control. I had this baby. I was reconfiguring my identity. I was sleep deprived. It was just this hot mess. So I knew it was time for a course of treatment. I often think it's time for me to see a therapist when I'm going through a big transition. So anyways, I was sharing with this therapist. She was an infertility specialist. I was sharing my grief about how I wanted, my grief about my childbirth and how I wish it would have looked with my family of origin versus how it did look. And she said to me, that is such a cliche view of what a family is. And it just didn't feel good in that moment. I'm actually notorious as a therapist for being kind of confrontational with my clients when they have dysfunctional thoughts. So I was like, okay, I'm going to roll with it. And I just said, well, it really does feel like I'm grieving what I was expecting. And she just kind of like doubled down with confronting this dysfunctional thought. And she aggressively was, trying to fight that this was a dysfunctional thought. I don't think it was a dysfunctional thought. I think it was a feeling that I was trying to share. So it just didn't feel good. I felt like even though I was, pushing back, she wasn't relenting and it just felt yucky. So anyways, I emailed her and said, hey, I felt really invalidated in that moment. And she didn't apologize. She doubled down again and said it was a disconnecting moment. I think that's a lack of accountability, and I believe in therapy being an environment where you're supposed to advocate for yourself. It's an environment where you're supposed to practice advocating. So long story short, it just didn't feel good. I let her go. I said, you know what? This isn't going to be a good match. And I moved on, and I found a better therapist. You can too. All right, sign number 4, no accountability. Perfect example is that therapist saying well, we had a disconnecting moment. No, biatch, you were trying to confront a distorted thought, but it wasn't a distorted thought. It was an emotion, and emotions should be given space and validated. Thank you very much. Therapy is not just about talking. It's about doing. So if you've been in therapy for years and you're stuck in the same patterns with no progress, it is time to ask your therapist some tough questions. If you're not holding your therapist accountable and you're not saying, hey, what are we working on? What's the goal? I feel like I'm a little stuck. I feel like we need to change up the style or do something different to help me move forward. And they don't take accountability, or if they foster that dependence on them, it really is unethical. You should be working towards a goal and eventually graduation. That is the ultimate goal, is to be so happy that you fire us as therapists. Yay! All right, sign number 5, they're pushing too hard. So on the flip side, some therapists just go too far. Maybe they're asking you to do things that are so unrealistic for your life. Maybe you're a working mom with 3 young children and they're telling you to do 20-minute mindfulness app exercises every day, and you're just not going to do it. So you go in every week and they tell you to do stuff and you're just not going to do these things. That's an example of somebody who's maybe not starting where you are. So as a therapist, they should join you where you are and help find tools and skills and resources that are going to help with your particular life circumstances and your capacity. So therapy should stretch you, yeah, but it shouldn't break you. Another good example of this is if you're in couples therapy and the couples therapist is telling you each to get your own therapist as well. Like, if I'm going every week to couples therapy and individual therapy, I'm going to get therapied the fuck out. It's just too much. Just be mindful of that. Or maybe if you're like you're feeling better and the therapist doesn't suggest dropping down to biweekly or monthly or graduating, that's another example that their intentions might not be for you to graduate, which honestly it should be. Okay, so there are your 5 signs. We have not remembering stuff, all venting. If you're sitting in, session and it's just all talking, obviously it's all talking, but you get what I mean. It's all venting. 3, they're showing you judging or they're biased towards something. Sign 4, they're not taking accountability when you question them or confront them. And sign 5, maybe they're pushing too hard, or their recommendations aren't fitting you and what you need. So, what should therapy actually look like? It should be a relationship that's all about you, right? The only time in life where everything's all about you is when you're 2, not when you're an adult. So creating this space for you to reflect on your life and your own growth is so important. Therapy should also provide you an emotionally corrective experience. So a therapeutic relationship is often one where expectations are clear, boundaries are upheld, it's safe, they're not going to freak out on you, right? So it's this environment where you get to practice skills and they're going to be a functional person to practice them with. So that's what we mean by an emotionally corrective experience. There also should provide you with tools, strategies, and a clear plan to help you grow. So they should have a clear modality. A lot of therapists are like, well, I'm eclectic. And AKA, sometimes eclectic is awesome. Sometimes eclectic means the therapist is trained in lots of different modalities and they're using a blend to really help you get somewhere. But sometimes the term eclectic is them saying, I'm just telling people what I think they should do. And it's coming from no theory and no modality at all. Ew, that's not what you want. And last thing, a therapy course of treatment should be focused on your goals with an eventual plan for graduation, pushing you towards graduation. If your therapist isn't giving you these things, it's okay to move on. You really do deserve the right fit. So obviously you could terminate treatment, you could end the therapeutic relationship, even though sometimes it's really uncomfortable and awkward, but it doesn't have to be. So the first one could be being honest, letting them know that you feel like it's run its course. You could really focus on what your needs, like this is about what's best for you, and they should really be on board with that. You could ask for referrals like, hey, I think it's time for me to explore my trauma, or I think it's time for me to find somebody who specializes in DBT maybe to do something a little bit different. You can also request your records, and taking those records to a new therapist helps with that whole I have to start all over again. I have to tell them my whole life story. No, not necessarily, because if you request your records, you should have a good treatment plan and a good assessment that will help catch the new therapist up a little bit. P.S. You do not have a right to your therapy progress notes. That's a misconception. Commonly, people feel like they have a right to all of their notes. You don't, but you can get your CCA and your treatment plan, which are valuable. CCA just means comprehensive clinical assessment. I'm sure it means lots of different things, but that's what I think it means. It basically just means your assessment. So they're going to write in there your psychosocial history, your how you were brought up, what problems you're bringing in. They're going to write down your diagnosis and justify the diagnosis by explaining what criteria you meet. They're going to write down your different cultural needs and some basic treatment goals. They're also, the treatment plan is more of an in-depth, like what you guys are working on in session and what baby steps are going to lead to those big ultimate goals. So that's what I mean in that fancy terminology. Okay, a little note about ghosting. Don't ghost your therapist. This is a humongous disservice. It's a disservice to you, and it's a disservice to other people, and I'll tell you why. A disservice to you in that this is a really good opportunity for you to end a relationship in a healthy way. It's a very emotionally corrective experience to be able to end a relationship and it not feel icky or weird. It's just, hey, this is no longer serving me. I appreciate your help. It's time for me to move on, right? It just feels better. You could sleep at night. You don't have to worry about ghosting or avoiding. You're leaning into this being assertive, and it's just good practice. The second thing is it's a disservice to the therapist. If you don't tell them maybe what didn't work well, or you didn't tell them like you're moving on because you don't think it's a good fit anymore, they don't have the opportunity to get that feedback, which might make them better for future clients. So an alternative to terminating the therapy relationship and either stopping therapy or finding a new therapist is advocating for yourself and your own treatment in an assertive way. So you could share with your therapist, hey, this is what's working for me. This is what's not working for me. You could ask them to utilize a different modality. You could ask them for a more structured session. You could invite them to create a treatment plan with you or review their treatment plan with you. Avoid being aggressive. You don't want to tell them like, hey, you suck. This is uncomfortable. Or being passive and just continuing to go even though it's not serving you. One last thing I'm going to say is that therapists are people too. So be mindful when you have these conversations or you advocate in an email, if that's more comfortable for you to advocate for yourself in email instead of in person. Just be mindful. You're obviously not responsible for the feelings of your therapist, and we want you to express your feelings, but you are responsible for how you share feelings. It reminds me of that saying, say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. Don't be an asshole, right? Come on. Okay, so that's it for today's episode. Remember that therapy is an investment in yourself for yourself, and that you deserve to work with someone who meets you where you are and helps you grow and is invested in your growth and eventual graduation from that course of treatment. Remember that you can always come back for another course of treatment if you run into a different situation in your life, like you have another baby, or you get a divorce, or you change jobs, or maybe seasonal affective disorder, right? You come back every winter. Who knows? If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend and leave me a review. It really helps people find the show and get the tools they need to thrive. So until next time, take care of yourself, keep evolving, you've got this. And that's a wrap. Thanks for hanging out with me on Not Your Therapist. If you're ready to break free from unhealthy patterns, head over to KaylaRiley.com and grab the free Get Unstuck audio training. When you sign up, you're going to become an NYT insider with access to exclusive freebies, behind the scenes content, and my most badass gems reserved just for you. And hey, if you're loving the show, the best way to support me is by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with a friend. Together, we can help more people manage life's mess, magic, and everything in between. Remember that success is only measured by how profoundly you experience your life, so don't settle for anything less than epic. I'll see you next time.